Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the Banff podcast. I am here with Andrew Collis, aka Bear the Fever DM. How you doing?
I'm good. We're having a snowstorm in Montreal, but otherwise I'm good.
How bad's it looking out there?
They say over the next 3 days we're going to get 30 centimeters of snow. So I don't know what that is for Americans, but it's a lot.
Yeah, we got about 6 inches here a few weeks ago. 30
It's about almost a
centimeters,
foot. It's almost a
almost
foot.
a foot. Yeah, so yikes. Well, stay inside and hope you get your bread and milk.
I got my coffee. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and you will notice below. Andrew and I is an icon for Jess Nevins, who has been an author for 20 years. Jess has written all kinds of cool stuff. The Encyclopedia of Fantastic Victoriania. He's also written a lot of, let's see, he has a Simon & Schuster page. He is currently a college librarian. He's been published in Steve Jackson Games Pyramid. Jess has done a lot of cool stuff, and we're hoping to talk to him tonight, but he's having technical problems. Oh, he just dropped out. So let's talk about his Kickstarter real fast. And I've invited Andrew because Andrew is a big fan of Vikings, and this is a Viking-centric RPG. The Fury of the Northmen. The Fury of the Northmen is a 5e compatible role-playing game set during the Viking invasion of 865 to 871 CE. And $30,000 goal. They're about halfway there. 21 days left. I gotta tell you, it really looks amazing and very well researched. Let me put up the link so people can see that.
Indeed.
Yeah, so tinyurl.com/Fury Northmen would be the easiest way to find it. And let's just scroll down a little bit and check out some of this art. This is the Necromancer here. This freaky looking guy with the wooden head. Image by Russell Marks. The Fear of the Northmen is a 5th edition compatible game setting written by Jess Nevins with art by Russell Marks, Kim Van Duyn, David Joyce, Elizabeth Piero, and a host of others. The homepage for Northmen is here. Oh, he has another website for this. I did not. Oh, here we go. So what's the Fury of the Northmen? It's a role-playing game. The Fury of the Northmen is set in England during the Viking invasion of 865 to 878 when the Viking Great Army invaded the English four kingdoms of East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex in search of treasure, slaves, and territory. Well, this kind of sounds like the same story that was covered in later seasons of the Vikings TV show on History Channel.
Don't know, never watched that show. I prefer actual history to that nonsense.
That's fair. I can see that. Historically, the invasion resulted in the unification of the four kingdoms under the control of Wessex and the establishment of the Viking colony in England, the Danelaw. Northmen is set during the first 6 years of the conflict when the outcome of the invasion is still in doubt. Northmen players can play PCs fighting for the four kingdoms of Vikings or for themselves, and can go in search of adventure, treasure, and everlasting glory. It's a combination of historical material and English Norse folklore and mythology. Jess spent about 3 years doing research for the game, reading over 1,000 books, chapters, and journal articles. The bibliography listed in Fear the Northmen runs for over 250 items. Yikes. And the result is, Jess thinks, a unique Viking role-playing game, one that has a great degree of historical accuracy, in addition to all the Viking mythology and folklore the RPG players have come to expect. I gotta tell you, this sounds like a lot of fun.
There's a really fun line in the paragraph after the map of England that says, "as historically accurate as fun allows," and I think that just sums up my entire joy about that.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Jess.
Sorry about that. I switched to my phone.
Well, we can hear you perfectly now. We were just doing a quick introduction about your book, which sounds like a big shivering mound of fun. I gotta tell you. This looks like an amazing project.
I tried to make it as both historically accurate and purely enjoyable as it is. I packed so many plot hooks, so many little nuggets of joy in the player's guide and the world handbook. I think it really rewards reading. But I would think that.
Technically, right.
Oh, we did a brief summary of your resume before you came on. But why don't you, for some of our backers who might appreciate hearing more about your background, can you tell us about your books? I know you're a college librarian. You've been published several times. But
well, I've written 21 books, I think, 21. I've written annotations for various comic books, including Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Um, I've written a few encyclopedias on pulp fiction and Victorian genre fiction. I've written a history of superheroes, or a history of the concept of the superhero. I wrote a history of horror fiction in the 20th century. I've done chapters and papers here and there. I've written a couple of games for Evil Hat Publishing, but this is my first big game on Kickstarter.
Okay, cool. Did you get to talk to Alan Moore when you were doing the annotation for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
Many times.
Is he as wacky as he appears to be when he talks?
He's a pure sweetheart and a total pussycat. He's got this reputation of being really cranky, but in my experience with him is that he's, as long as you're not asking him about superhero comics all the time, you'll do fine. He loves to talk. He loves to talk about just about anything under the sun. It's just that for whatever reason, people are always asking him to comment on his superhero writing, and that drives him up the wall.
I can understand. I mean, the politics around Watchmen, or how DC treated him in regards to Watchmen, is got to be one of the most painful chapters of his life, and it seems like every journalist always wants him to revisit that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, with all due respect, to Mr. Moore, and I don't mean to dismiss him, he did redefine an entire age of comics that, out of his work, changed the entire way superhero comics were seen for the next 30 years. He's got to understand people are going to want to talk about that. It's, it's kind of like talking to Shakespeare, but you're not allowed to bring up plays,
Yeah, understood.
I promise if I ever interview him, I will never bring up Watchmen or Grant Morrison.
Oh, I was going to say, I want to bring up Grant Morrison just to see if I can trigger the argument again, because those two are hilarious when they go at each other.
Yeah, you don't want to get involved in wizard battles.
Can we get Garth Ennis in the middle of that? And that'll just be heaven for me, just watching them all argue with each other with those accents. That'd be great.
Jess, I'm afraid we got off subject. Forgive me.
I apologize. I'm
a
bit of
quite okay.
So this is one of the most well-researched Viking RPGs I've ever come across. I was looking at, reading the Fury of the Northmen page and just looking at the amount of research in your bibliography for it. I gotta say, I was really impressed by the level of research you engaged in for this book.
Well, to be honest, as soon as I started diving into Viking studies, Viking research, I kept coming across all this low-hanging fruit. Just these wonderful little tidbits of Norse and Scandinavian folklore or mythology, things like the Norse goddesses essentially being counterparts, the goddesses being counterparts to the men. Only the chief among the goddesses goes out drinking with Odin regularly, and that's the main contact between the gods and the goddesses. And so you've got these badass Valkyrie and Dizir, but you've also got the badass goddesses who are completely untapped in Viking stuff. So the research was fractal. The more I got into it, the more I found to do research on. And before I knew it, I had an enormous bibliography of work that I'd read.
Yeah, I remember I was reading Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman a few years back, which of course is a fictionalized version. But he mentions it's kind of a great tragedy that so many of the myths were lost, and really what we have is kind of a few of the sagas in Iceland, mainly featuring on Loki and Thor. When there was so much else that was just lost in the ages.
They were lost or destroyed by the Christian Church. Most of what we get is from this 12th century, 13th century Icelandic scholar, poet, politician named Snorri Sturluson, but he Christianized a lot of the myths to make them more in line with his personal religious beliefs and less pagan, so that Odin, who hung himself on the world tree to get runic wisdom, in the original, there's in Snorri Sturluson's version, he stabs himself in the side to mirror Christ being stabbed in the side. Well, in the original, there's no sign of where he got stabbed. I have a theory that he stabbed himself in the groin to make himself more like a woman, because magic was women's work. But we have no way of knowing these things. So yeah, we're getting by on scraps pretty much compared to the feast that used to be there.
Well, I mean, and this is the thing, right? We're talking about the Prose Edda at this point in time, which is, pretty much the primary source for most people for Norse mythology. And then you watch a show like Vikings, where we actually have the history of these people to refer to, and they just play freestyle with it, putting people, at battles where they would, if they had been at the battle, they would have been 90 years old. It's absolutely absurd. And the problem for me is I'm of Celtic and Danish descent. So I'm a Celtic Viking, so I'm Scotch, Irish, and Scots, Irish, and Danish, and it just infuriates me watching people think this is the culture of my people. This is the culture of my ancestry. It's like, no, we weren't. Vikings were a very small group. They weren't everybody. There were way more farmers.
Right.
Way more.
Right, and I'm sure Viking means raider or trader or pirate or some combination of those. I use Viking interchangeably with Scandinavians in the game purely out of ease of use.
Absolutely.
But I do make it clear early on in the book that everyone wasn't a Viking. It was just those men and perhaps women who went out and went on raids or went on trading missions, and that even among the Scandinavians, you had your coastal Vikings, and then you had your inland Vikings, and you had your Irish Vikings and your Icelandic Vikings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah. It's one of the most fascinating pieces of European history, and you've chosen a really good piece of it to feature for this game, just in the ways of how much influence this period had on European history moving forward. It's people will never truly understand what an impact the Viking raids had on everything that happened, from families to how you build a house to the concept of castles. Like, it's just amazing how much the Romans would be about the only other people I'd say had that much effect on the whole of Europe,
Yeah, and they were an integral part of the international trading network, so that you've got the famous Buddhist statue ending up in Ireland, Norway.
Yeah, that's actually, if you go see that big funeral ship outside of Oslo, they got a little Buddha statue right there in one of the cases.
If you go to Sancta Sophia in Istanbul, there's Viking ruins graffiti carved in the rocks that is essentially Ragnar was here, 942. That's all they did. But I argue with my Russian friends because they want to tell me that Russians are their own thing. And I'm like, you were created by the Vikings coming down and creating Novgorod, and then the Kievan Rus river, the river people, and it's just amazing, this dismissal of history. But I think more than anything else, this is slightly off topic, is how in 1,000 years they went from being the terrors of Europe and parts of the Middle East to the social democratic ideal of Europe now in Scandinavia. It's just like blows my mind, man. Blows my mind.
I was actually in Iceland a few years ago. We were hiking around a national park, and there was a bunch of Americans were dressed up in Viking garb getting married. And I knew like half a dozen Viking phrases, and I was trying to talk to the park ranger next to me. Yeah. I said, "Oh, look at the Viking wedding," and he stopped. He's like, "No, it's not a Viking wedding. It's a costume wedding. It is very nice. They are enjoying themselves." But anyway, let's talk about Mr. Nevins' game, because this really does look amazing.
It does.
Since we're primarily a podcast focused on gaming, I wanted to talk about this section here on your website. You've got some interesting differences between Northmen and the regular SRD of 5th edition. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. D&D tries to be sort of setting agnostic in that the player's handbook tries not to tell you about the world you're going to adventure in. But there are still things in the player's handbook and the SRD that come with assumptions. And a lot of those assumptions don't apply to the world of England in 865 to 871. Like, for example, magic in D&D for wizards comes from learning. A lot of it's written, there's scrolls and tomes and whatnot. Well, that doesn't work at all for the Scandinavians or the English, really. Their conception, their ideas of magic were different. How they learned magic was different. So I couldn't use the wizard class because there were assumptions baked into it that didn't work. So I had to come up with my own classes. And when you really start looking at it, the D&D, a lot of the D&D classes have these assumptions, like the cleric comes from a powerful church. Well, the Anglo-Saxons, or the Anglican as they call them, the church in England in 865 was much more decentralized and based on territories and abbeys and monasteries. So you can't really have a cleric class coming from a decentralized church system. So I made the historical version, the monk or the nun. And there's a lot of stuff like that in the SRD where I had to go back to first principles. I had to make my own character classes. I had to make my own spells, just because Viking magic, Scandinavian magic, and Anglo-Saxon Anglican magic is not explodo. It tends to be more subtle, a lot more charms, curses, fear spells, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I believe me, I wanted to rely on the SRD heavily just to spare myself the work, but that's not how it turned out.
No, that's good now. Given all the last couple of weeks of hoopla, I mean that's turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My God, Mike, there's a little Mike behind you. Look out!
Yeah, this is my very small clone. We're trying to age him up so he can replace me. So,
Hi.
You want to say hi, Connor? Yeah, I know. Hey. It's time
Hi,
for bed,
Connor.
right?
Yeah, please.
I'll be up in a few minutes. Okay. All right.
But by the way, it did break the front part of the laser cannon off.
What's
my
that?
laser.
I'll keep talking with Jess.
Thank you.
Jess. So that's worked out to your favor. Then now, are you going to be releasing this game as open game content for folks?
We'll see what happens with the Kickstarter. If the Kickstarter doesn't fund, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try and pay for a professional layout and then just sell it as on Drive-Thru RPG.
Okay.
I'm going back and forth on what I'm going to release it as.
Sure.
I think everyone's having that kind of internal debate right now.
Dude, don't even get me started. My entire publishing plans for 2023 went up in the air in smoke. It's insane.
Yeah, everything with Wizards jumped off about 2 weeks before my Kickstarter went live, and I had to really think about rewriting it in my own, coming up with a new system and rewriting it in some other open system. But between the 3 books, the Player's Guide, the World Book, and the Bestiary, it's about 500,000 words, and I didn't have the time and I didn't have the energy for that.
Yeah.
So I stuck with 5e more or less.
I have to give you kudos for one thing. There's many times I look at RPG Kickstarters and I'm like, all right, interesting word building, but as a player, what do I do here? And you got a really interesting section on story hooks that answers that question in a really cool way. Just want to read a few of these if you don't mind.
Sure.
The PCs on their way toward the Battle of York get lost. Now wolves and something worse than wolves are chasing them through the marshes and across the rivers outside of York. That just sounds like a fun session. A group of awakened trees march on a Mercian village and start killing all the humans in a miniature rebellion of nature against the tyrant man. That is a game I want to be in. That sounds really cool. Tree ants gone wild. Hold the line. If you're part of the shield wall breaks, the entire left flank of the army will be exposed. The reading will fall to the invaders like so many towns before it. I'd be interested about how you do the shield wall mechanic in a game. Just I spent some time in the SCA and did my tours of duties in a few different shield walls. And I'd be interested to see how you model that experience. But yeah, it just looks like a lot of fun hooks you built in for people to experience.
I'd like to think that the game, despite the game setting being very oriented around the Viking invasion and the Anglican response, I'd like to think that you can play just about any kind of D&D 5e SRD game you want in the setting, because you can do conspiracy to grow powerful among the Anglican Four Kingdoms or among the Viking petty kingdoms. You can do dungeon dives in the abandoned Roman and Anglican mines. You can do, safari experience point safaris. You can go treasure hunting. You can do just about any sort of D&D game you want in this setting. It's just that there are certain odd limitations to things because of the setting, but it doesn't hinder. It shouldn't hinder anybody playing the same sort of game they want to play.
Okay. Well, hey, let's talk about rewards and pledge levels. It's worth pointing out, as you mentioned, this is not one book. This is 3 books people are pledging for, right?
Right.
Okay. And let's see. So your entry level pledge is $10. That's the hardship tier. That's I'm guessing that's PDF only. And then it looks okay. No, it's just okay. And then $25. That's kind of your bread and butter, your entry level PDF tier. And then $50 is the 1 book tier. I'm guessing you guys are doing print on demand from drive-through, or are you fulfilling print some other way?
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I was just asking how you're doing print, if it's drive-through or something else.
Oh, I've got a local printing place. I'm gonna print it through, and then just send the PDFs out. As I was saying earlier, if the Kickstarter doesn't make, I'll pay to have it laid out and then professionally, and then sell it as PDFs on drive-through.
All right, fair enough. I understand. You're after a pretty good start, though. I would be surprised if you don't fund.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, it's always a roll of the dice, but I think you're going pretty strong.
Jesus. Yep, I dread doing Kickstarters because of that bloody ride up and down on that. But yeah, God bless you.
Yeah,
well,
I tried.
Maybe all Father bless you. What am I saying? My goodness.
So, in terms of Viking media, is there any that you would recommend as more historically accurate, or?
I think the Northman came closest. It had a couple of very well-respected consultants for the film, like Neil Price, whose work I think highly of. But it's the Northman is a good Viking film. I'm not sure I'd call it fun.
No.
Vikings, the TV show, is more fun, less accurate. So I'm sort of particular about Viking media, and I'm not sure I'll ever get what I want. But I think the Northman came closest.
What was the? There was a Grendel movie done not so long ago with what's her name from Anna Green Gables. Oh my God, I can't remember her name. The actress, she's Canadian. I'm gonna
You don't mean the 13th Warrior, do you?
No, not I love 13th Warrior. Don't get me wrong. I love that movie so much, but no, that's not what I'm referring to. But there was a movie set in, I think it was set in Iceland, and it was pretty good. Like it wasn't 100% accurate by any stretch of the imagination, but it was pretty good. I just can't remember what the hell the name of it was. Oh, well, that's what I get for that.
Well, there's one called Beowulf and Grendel in 2005 that starred Gerard Butler.
Yeah, that's the animated one. That's the one that has Angelina Jolie as the mother of Grendel.
No, it's
no.
Sarah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's the one. Okay, then that's the one. I'm thinking of the different one. There's another one that was done before. Yeah, that one. It's not bad, buddy. Sarah Polley, by the way, is the actress. Good call. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It actually tries to sort of sympathize Grendel a lot for you. Right. By basically having his family being hunted by the local lords and killed without reason. So it's all a revenge story from his point of view. And Sarah Polley, of course, because women are magic, he has the whole women magic thing going on. It's actually a decent little film. Northmen, I thought, was really good. And I thought Northmen really handled the one thing I feel is hinted at in 13th Warrior and left out of so many good Viking stories, the power of mist. And how much mist played into their existence and their mythology and their fears. It's insanely good. Now, can I play a Saxon? An Anglo-Saxon in this game?
Yeah. The character classes are roughly evenly split between Angles and Saxons and Scandinavians. So you can play... and in the book, I go into detail about various foreigners you can play as well, basically detailing any of the major nationalities who came into contact with the Vikings who might have gone to England. That I didn't put into the Kickstarter, but yes, you can definitely play a Saxon warrior or Saxon whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to, though my sympathies were with Viking culture, I tried to make it as open to someone who wanted to play the Angles and the Saxons as someone who wanted to play the Scandinavians.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, here's an interesting class. How do you... Wodenman? How do you say that?
Wodenman.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Anglo-Clan man who still worships the old Anglo-Saxon god Woden and acts as a divinely empowered guardian of a clan, hamlet, village, or town. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about what rural England must have been like in the 9th century, and while Christianity had been dominant for 4 or 5 centuries, I'm willing to bet there were still way out in the more rural areas, little corners of England that people didn't go to. There were still worshippers of the old gods.
Oh,
right. the ones brought by the Angles and Saxons and Jutes and Frisians, and mm-hmm. I want to make a class for that sort of worshiper.
That's
awesome. That is really interesting. Yeah, just below that on the screen we're looking at, we've got the wolfskin, which a wolfskin-clad holy warrior of Odin. The wolfskin takes on the persona and physical abilities of the wolf while in the service of their jarl and of Odin himself. That's kind of cool.
The wolfskins, historically, there were the bearskins who were the berserks. You had the wolfskins who were the Ulfhethnar, and you had the boarskins, and they were all sort of shock troops for the jarl's armies and bodyguards for the jarls, but they all did slightly different things. And for the game, I exaggerated that. So berserks are more bearish. The wolfskins are more wolfish. and I tried to differentiate them as much as possible.
Nothing wrong with that, man. That sounds fun. I just went and backed you, by the way. I'm gonna get the PDFs for sure.
Well, thank you.
No, I'm in Canada. I never buy anything in books anymore. The shipping murders me. Trust me.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
nobody has good shipping to Canada anymore, and I feel it's double worse for the Aussies. I hear about that from them all the time. But PDFs, I'm in.
It's really terrible for South America for some reason.
Well,
yeah.
Trust me.
So you can play a troll.
Well, you can play a troll out of the Eddas and the poems and the myths, which isn't the
same as we're thinking about with D&D trolls, right?
Right. The Eddas and the myths and the poems make a point of saying how a troll can be this and a troll can be that. A troll can be a wolf. A woman can be a troll. A cloud can be a troll. A snake can be a troll. Troll isn't a noun, it's an adjective.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, the fact that trolls could be just about anything, and in the Eddas and myths and poems, they were just about everything. I decided that, well, this is a shape-changing race. And so I tried to rely as heavily on the myths as I could for this, but I had to depart from what people think of the trolls as, because in the mythology, trolls are evil, but they're not stupid, they're not ugly, and they're not brutish. So I broke it down and made it into a character class that has a number of abilities and a number of vulnerabilities. I tried to balance it out as much as possible. But yes, you can play a troll.
Mike was just hoping he could play like a 200-foot tall tree-wielding maniac, like from the movie Troll. Sorry, Mike. No dice, buddy.
It's okay. It's all right. That is one of my favorite Scandinavian movies of the last decade or so. But yeah. Indeed. Well, hey, Jess, it has been a real pleasure talking to you. To anyone listening and not watching, we've got a tiny URL that points right to the Kickstarter, tinyurl.com/Fury Northmen. Got about 21 days left. You should definitely go back this. This is a fascinating project. I think it's going to be a great read, or probably even much more fun to play. So,
and a fantastic resource for other games that you're running as well. You're not limited to 5e, baby.
The world book is system agnostic. It is a book about the world of England and, to a lesser extent, Scandinavia in the year 865. So it's got some stuff that is specific to Fury of the Northmen, but there's a whole lot of stuff there that can be used by anyone interested in gaming at that era, regardless of what system you're using.
That's a good call out. I missed that when I was reading through. That's so if you're playing Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, Champions, whatever system you're playing, or into Vikings, this is a good resource to tap into. So awesome. And I just backed as well. So, got 2 backers.
Well, thank you very much.
So anyway, Andrew, any closing thoughts or before we call it a show?
Lo there, do I see the line of my ancestors? That's all I have to say, man. That's all I have to say.
All right, Jess, I'll give you the absolute last word before we sign off.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I hope the Kickstarter fulfills, because I've got a lot more to write about in this setting, and I'd love to write more. So thank you for having me on and letting me promote the Kickstarter.
It was a pleasure, sir. And thanks to all our listeners and viewers. We'll catch you next time on the BAMF Podcast.